You want to know what really happened at Mercy General that night? Fine, I'll tell you everything. But don't expect me to make sense of it all, because what really happened at Mercy General that night? Fine, I'll tell you everything. But don't expect me to make sense of it all, because 3 months later, I still wake up in cold. You want to know what really happened at Mercy General that night? Fine, I'll tell you everything. But don't expect me to make sense of it all, because 3 months later, I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about those hallways. My name is Marcus Rodriguez. I'm 34 years old, and I used to work security at hospitals around the Midwest. Good steady work, you know? Decent pay, decent benefits. But after what happened at Mercy General, I can't even walk into a doctor's office without my hand shaking. Let me start from the beginning. Mercy General Hospital sat about 40 miles outside of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Built back in 1962, closed down in 2008 after some real bad stuff went down. I'm talking about 17 unexplained deaths in 6 months. Patients who were getting better suddenly flatlining for no reason. Healthy people coming in for routine procedures and never making it out alive. The state shut them down, and the place has been sitting empty ever since. I worked security there for 3 years before they closed the doors. Night shift mostly. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., walking those long corridors with nothing but a flashlight and a radio that barely worked half the time. Even when the place was running, it had this feeling to it, like the walls were watching you, like something was always just around the corner, waiting. But I needed the work back then. My wife Rosa was pregnant with our first kid, and hospital security paid better than anything else I could find. So I learned to ignore the weird stuff. The elevators that would open on floors where nobody pressed a button, the way the temperature would drop 20 degrees in certain rooms. The patients who swore they saw people in their rooms at night, people who weren't supposed to be there. Management always had explanations. Old building, they'd say. Faulty wiring. Confused patients seeing things because of their medication. And maybe I wanted to believe them, because believing meant I could keep doing my job and bringing home a paycheck. After they shut down Mercy General, I found work at other hospitals. Moved around a lot, but I kept hearing stories about the old place. Urban explorers breaking in and running out scared. Local kids daring each other to spend a night there. Nobody ever stayed long. And the stories they told, well, they all sounded familiar. See, I started getting into urban exploration about 2 years ago. It became kind of an obsession, if I'm being honest. There's something about abandoned places that pulls at you. Maybe it's the silence, or the way everything just stops in time. Or maybe it's the adrenaline rush of being somewhere you're not supposed to be. I'd been to dozens of abandoned buildings by the time I decided to go back to Mercy General. Old factories, empty schools, houses where families just up and left everything behind. I had all the gear, good flashlights, backup batteries, a digital camera, even one of those electromagnetic field detectors that ghost hunters use. Not that I believed in ghosts back then, but the equipment was cheap on eBay, and it made for interesting photos. The night I went back was October 13th, 2023. Friday the 13th. Yeah, I know how that sounds now, but I wasn't thinking about superstitions then. I was thinking about getting some great shots of the place where I used to work. Maybe even selling them to one of those urban exploration websites. I drove out there around 10 p.m. The hospital sits at the end of this long, winding road that cuts through farmland. Nothing but cornfields for miles. and then suddenly this big concrete building rises up out of nowhere like some kind of monument to sickness and death. 5 stories tall, windows boarded up or broken out entirely, the parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds pushing up through the asphalt. I parked about a quarter mile away and walked up. The main entrance was chained shut, but I knew from my security days that there was a loading dock in the back where the chain link fence had a gap in it. Hospital administration never bothered to fix it properly, and I figured after 15 years, it was probably still there. It was. I squeezed through the fence and made my way to the loading dock. The big metal door was rusted shut, but there was a smaller door next to it that looked like it had been forced open before, probably by other explorers or maybe just vandals. The metal was bent back just enough for someone my size to slip through. That's when I should have turned around and left. Standing there in front of that dark doorway, I felt the same thing I used to feel during my security rounds. That sense that something was waiting inside, watching. But I'd driven 40 miles to get there, and I had all my equipment ready. I told myself it was just nerves. I clicked on my main flashlight and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not the clean, sterile hospital smell I remembered. This was different. Stale air mixed with something sweet and rotting, like flowers left in a vase for too long. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, showing me a loading area filled with broken gurneys and medical equipment covered in dust and rust. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I made my way to the main corridor. I knew the layout by heart, even after 15 years. Straight ahead would take me to the elevator bank. Left would lead to the emergency department. Right would take me to the main stairwell that connected all 5 floors. I decided to start on the ground floor and work my way up, document everything systematically, like a real professional. I had this whole plan worked out. Take photos of each department. Maybe find some interesting medical equipment that got left behind. Make it look like a proper urban exploration project, instead of just some guy with a flashlight wandering around his old workplace. The main corridor stretched out in front of me, longer than I remembered. My flashlight beam seemed to get swallowed up by the darkness ahead. The walls were covered with that industrial-grade paint they use in hospitals, now peeling and stained with water damage. Ceiling tiles had fallen in places, creating obstacle courses of debris on the floor. But it was the quiet that got to me most. Not just regular quiet. This was a kind of silence that presses in on your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. Or at least, things you hope aren't there. I made it about 50 feet down the corridor when I heard the first sound. A ding, just like an elevator arriving at a floor. I stopped walking and listened. Nothing else. Just that one clear, metallic ding echoing off the walls. I told myself it was probably just the building settling. Old buildings make weird noises. I'd heard plenty of them during my security days. But then I heard it again. Ding. And then again. Ding. I followed the sound to the elevator bank. For elevators, just like I remembered, the call buttons were dark, no power running to them. But as I stood there, watching, the button for the second elevator lit up. A soft yellow glow in the darkness. Then the doors opened. I'm not ashamed to admit that I jumped back about 10 feet. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it over the sound of the elevator doors sliding apart. But there was nothing inside. Just an empty elevator car with that same stale, sweet smell drifting out of it. I waited for the doors to close. They didn't. They just stayed open, like the elevator was waiting for me to get on. This is just electrical problems, I said out loud, and my voice sounded strange in all that quiet. Old wiring acting up. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Mercy General without power for 15 years. Whatever was making that elevator work, it wasn't coming from the electric company. I took out my camera and snapped a few pictures of the open elevator. The flash lit up the whole area for a split second, and in that brief moment of light, I could have sworn I saw something move in the elevator car, a shadow that didn't match anything else in the space. When my eyes adjusted back to the darkness, the elevator doors had closed. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, waiting to see if anything else would happen. The elevator buttons were dark again. No more dings, just silence. I should have left right then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that building and never come back. But I'd been in plenty of abandoned places before, and there was always an explanation for the weird stuff. Squatters, maybe playing games with urban explorers, or just old building systems acting up in unexpected ways. So I kept going. The emergency department was my next stop. I pushed through the double doors and found myself in what used to be the waiting area. Plastic chairs were scattered around, some overturned, some arranged in neat rows like people were still expected to sit in them. The reception desk was empty, but there was still paper scattered across it. Patient forms from 2008, turned yellow with age. I started taking pictures, documenting everything. The camera flash lit up the space in quick bursts, creating these weird frozen moments where everything looked almost normal, like the hospital had just closed at night instead of being abandoned for 15 years. That's when I noticed the patient charts. There was a whole rack of them behind the reception desk. Thick folders filled with medical records. Most of them were from the last few months before the hospital closed. I pulled one out at random and opened it up. Jennifer Walsh, age 34, admitted for routine gallbladder surgery on March 15th, 2008. The surgery went fine, according to the notes. Everything normal, but then the entries got weird. March 16th, patient complaining of voices in her room. Nursing staff found no one present. March 17th, patient insists someone is calling her name from a hallway. Security check found corridor empty. March 18th, patient found dead at 3:33 a.m. Cause unknown. I flipped through more charts. Different names, different ages, different reasons for being admitted, but the pattern was the same. Routine procedures, normal recovery, then complaints about voices and sounds and people who weren't supposed to be there, and then death. Always at 3:33 a.m. My hand was shaking as I put the charts back. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. Still had plenty of time before 3:33, but suddenly I didn't want to be in that building when that time came around. I was heading back toward the main corridor when I heard my name. Marcus. Clear as day, a woman's voice, coming from somewhere deeper in the emergency department. I froze listening. Marcus, we need you in room 12. I knew that voice. It was Linda Hendricks, the head nurse who used to work the night shift. But Linda had been dead for 8 years. Heart attack at home, not even at the hospital. Marcus, please come to room 12. The voice was coming from the treatment area, past the reception desk. I wanted to run. Every fiber of my being was telling me to get out of there as fast as I could. But something else was pulling me forward. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something darker than that. The same thing that had brought me back to Mercy General in the first place. I followed the voice. The treatment area was a maze of small rooms separated by curtains. Most of the curtains were drawn back, showing empty beds within mattresses stained by water damage and time. But room 12 was different. The curtain was pulled closed, and there was light coming from behind it. Not electric light. This was softer, like candlelight. I could hear something moving behind that curtain. Quiet sounds, like someone working. The rustle of papers. The clink of metal instruments. Marcus, I know you're there. Come help me with this patient. Linda's voice again. and it was definitely coming from room 12. I reached out and pulled the curtain back. The room was empty. No Linda, no patient, no source for the light I'd seen. Just an empty bed and some rusted medical equipment mounted on the wall. But the smell was stronger here, that sweet, rotting flower smell that seemed to follow me through the whole building. On the bed was a patient chart, a new one, not yellow with age like the others. The paper was crisp and white, like it had just been printed. The name at the top made my blood freeze. Marcus Rodriguez. I picked up the chart with trembling hands. It was all there. My full name, my address, my social security number, and medical information that was completely accurate. An appendectomy I'd had when I was 12, a broken wrist from high school football, even my blood type. But the admission date was today, October 13th, 2023. And the reason for admission was listed as nocturnal investigation of abandoned medical facility. The last entry was a nursing note dated just a few minutes ago. Patient exploring emergency department, exhibiting signs of increasing anxiety and paranoid behavior. Recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation. I dropped the chart and backed away from the bed. This was impossible. Nobody could have known I was coming here tonight. I hadn't told anyone, not even Rosa, and there was no way someone could have prepared this chart ahead of time and somehow known exactly when I'd find it, unless someone was watching me right now. I spun around, scanning the treatment area with my flashlight. Empty rooms, drawn curtains, medical equipment covered in dust. But I had the strongest feeling that I wasn't alone anymore, that eyes were watching me from the shadows between the flash of my light. "Hello," I called out. "If someone's here, just say something. This isn't funny anymore." No answer, just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. I needed to get out of the emergency department, maybe out of the building entirely. But as I headed back toward the main corridor, I heard new sounds. Footsteps in the hallway ahead of me, multiple sets of them, walking at different paces. The squeak of gurney wheels rolling across linoleum, voices talking in low, urgent tones, the sounds of a working hospital. I pushed through the double doors and found myself back in the main corridor. But it wasn't empty anymore. The hallway was full of people, doctors in white coats walking briskly from room to room, nurses pushing medication carts, orderlies wheeling patients on gurneys, all of them moving with purpose, like they had important work to do. But none of them seemed to see me. I stood there in the middle of the corridor, and they just walked around me, through me. Sometimes I could feel the cold rush of air as they passed, but when I reached out to touch one of them, my hand went right through. These weren't people. They were something else. Shadows, maybe, or memories of the people who used to work here, going through the motions of their old jobs, night after night, 15 years after the hospital closed. I watched the doctor hurry past, carrying a clipboard and muttering to himself about patient lab results. A nurse rushed by in the other direction, calling out room numbers over her shoulder. An orderly pushed an empty gurney down the hall, the wheels squeaking in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And then I saw Linda. She was standing at the nursing station, writing in a patient chart. The same Linda Hendricks who'd been dead for 8 years. She looked exactly like I remembered her. Short gray hair, reading glasses perched on her nose, that no-nonsense expression she wore when she was concentrating. She looked up and saw me watching her. "Marcus," she said and smiled. "I was wondering when you'd show up. We've been expecting you." I wanted to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. Linda walked over to me, her footsteps making no sound on the linoleum. "You look good," she said. "A little older, but good. How's Rosa? And the baby?" "Linda," I managed to say, You're dead. You died 8 years ago." She laughed. And it was exactly the same laugh I remembered, warm and genuine. The kind of laugh that made you feel better even when you were having the worst night of your life. "Dad," she said. "Marcus, what are you talking about? I'm right here. We're all right here. The hospital never closed, you know? We just kept working." She gestured to the busy hallway around us. Doctors and nurses continued their rounds, checking on patients, administering medications, saving lives. "But this is impossible," I said. "Mercy General has been abandoned for 15 years. There are no patients here, no staff, no power." Linda's smile faded a little. "Is that what you think? Marcus, look around you. Really look." I did look around, and for a moment, just a moment, I could see it the way she did. The lights were on, bright fluorescence humming overhead. The walls were painted in soft, calming colors instead of peeling industrial gray. The air smelled like disinfectant and fresh linens instead of rot and decay. The hospital was alive. But then I blinked, and it all went back to darkness and dust and the sweet smell of something dying. "You see," Linda said, "you're just confused. It happens sometimes when people work too many night shifts. Come on, I'll show you to your room. You need to rest." She took my real enough. Cold, but real. She started leading me down the corridor, away from the loading dock where I'd entered, away from my escape route. "My room," I asked. "Room 347, she said. "We've got it all ready for you, just like you always wanted. Room 347. I remembered that number from somewhere. It was familiar, but I couldn't place it. We walked past the elevator bank. All 4 elevators were open now, waiting. The buttons glowed softly in darkness, and I could hear that ding sound repeating over and over like a heartbeat. "We could take the elevator," Linda suggested. "It's faster." I shook my head. Something about those elevators made my skin crawl. "I'll take the stairs." Linda shrugged. "Suit yourself. But Marcus, you should know, once you go up to the 3rd floor, you can't come back down. Not until your treatment is complete." "What treatment?" She smiled again, but this time it didn't look warm. It looked hungry. "The same treatment we give all our patients, Marcus. We help them understand that some places never let you go. Some jobs never end. Some shifts last forever." That's when I remember where I'd seen room 347 before. It was in all those patient charts in the emergency department. Every single patient who died at Mercy General in those final months had been moved to room 347 before they flatlined. Room 347 was where people went to die. I jerked my arm away from Linda and ran. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, but her voice was different now. Darker, more urgent. "Marcus, Marcus, you can't leave. Your shift isn't over." I ran back toward the loading dock, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I sprinted down the corridor. But the hallway seemed longer now, like it was stretching out ahead of me. The exit should have been right there, but I kept running and running without getting any closer. The sounds of the hospital were getting louder behind me, not just footsteps and voices now, but alarms. Code blue announcements over the PA system. The crash of medical equipment being wheeled at high speed. Code blue, room 347. Code blue, room 347. Over and over, echoing through the building. I finally reached the loading dock area, gasping for breath. The small door I'd entered through was still there, still bent open just enough for me to squeeze through. But as I reached for it, it slammed shut with a sound like thunder. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door wouldn't budge. Behind me, the sounds were getting closer. I could hear Linda's voice over the PA system now. "Security to loading dock. Security to loading dock." We have a patient trying to leave before his treatment is complete. I beat on the door with my fists, throwing my whole body against it. Nothing. It was like it had been welded shut. That's when I remembered the main entrance. It was chained up, but maybe I could break through the glass doors or find another way out through the upper floors. I ran back into the building, past the elevators, all four still open, still dinging, past the emergency department toward the main lobby. But the hospital was changing around me as I moved. Rooms appeared where there hadn't been rooms before. Hallways branched off in directions that shouldn't exist. The building was bigger than it had been 15 years ago. Bigger than any building should be. And everywhere, the sound of that PA announcement. Code blue, room 347. I found a stairwell and started climbing. Maybe I could get to an upper floor and break out through a window. The stairs were old and rusty, but they felt solid enough. I climbed to the second floor, then the third. The third floor was different from the others. Darker, quieter. The air was thick and hard to breathe, like being underwater. And at the end of the corridor, there was light coming from under one door. Room 347. I didn't want to go near it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and find another way out. But the light was the only light on the entire floor, and I was starting to think it might be the only way forward. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The sweet, rotting smell was stronger here, almost overwhelming. As I got closer to room 347, I could hear something inside. Not voices this time, but a steady beeping sound. Heart monitors. I reached the door and looked at the nameplate next to it. It was blank, but as I watched, letters began to appear. MERCUSRODRIUEZ. My name, spelled out in neat hospital letters. The door was slightly open. Light spilled out into the hallway, and with it came the sound of medical equipment and quiet voices. "He's here," someone said from inside the room. "Vitals are stable. He's ready for procedure." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was exactly like a hospital room should be. Clean white walls, a hospital bed with crisp sheets, monitors, and 4 equipment arranged nearby. But lying in the bed was someone I recognized. It was me. I was lying in the hospital bed, eyes closed, connected to a dozen different machines. Heart monitor, oxygen, for drips. My other self looked peaceful, like I was just sleeping. Standing around the bed were the hospital staff. Linda was there, along with doctors and nurses I remember from 15 years ago. All of them dead, but all of them looking exactly like they had when they were alive. "Marcus," Linda said without looking away from me in the bed. "Right on time. We were just getting ready to begin your treatment." "What is this?" I asked. "What's happening?" "You had an accident," said Dr. Patterson, the old head of surgery. He was reading from a chart that I somehow knew was mine. "You were exploring the abandoned hospital when you fell through some rotted floorboards. Suffered severe head trauma. You've been unconscious for 3 hours." I looked at my watch. 2:47 a.m. "The ambulance is on its way," Dr. Patterson continued. "But I'm afraid you won't make it to the other hospital in time. We're going to have to treat you here." "But this place is abandoned," I said. "You're all dead. None of this is real." Linda finally looked up from the monitors. "Does it feel real, Marcus?" And it did. The beeping of the heart monitor, the smell of disinfectant, the bright lights overhead, it all felt completely real. More real than anything I'd experienced since entering the building. "The procedure is very simple," Dr. Patterson said. "We just need you to lie down in the bed next to yourself. Complete the circuit. Then you'll be able to stay here with us permanently. No more night shifts at other hospitals. No more wondering what happened to your old co-workers. You'll be home. I looked at the empty bed next to the one where my unconscious body lay. The sheets were turned down, waiting. What if I don't? I asked. Linda and Dr. Patterson exchanged glances. Well, Linda said, you can't leave, not in your condition. So you'll just wander the hallways forever, getting weaker and more confused. Eventually you'll collapse somewhere, and we'll find you and bring you back here anyway. But by then, the treatment might be more uncomfortable. The heart monitor connected to my unconscious body was beeping faster now. The line on the screen was getting erratic. You're running out of time, Dr. Patterson said. The head injury is getting worse. Lie down now and we can save you. Wait much longer, and there won't be anything left to save. I walked over to the empty bed. The sheets were cold against my hands. Will it hurt? I asked. No, Linda said gently. You'll just go to sleep, and when you wake up, you'll be one of us. You'll never have to leave Mercy General again. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The heart monitor was beeping even faster now. According to the screen, my blood pressure was dropping rapidly, but something was bothering me. Something Dr. Patterson had said. You said I've been unconscious for 3 hours. I said, but I've been exploring the hospital for less than 2 hours. I didn't get here until after 10 p.m. Dr. Patterson checked his chart again. According to our records, you were admitted at 8:33 p.m. That's impossible. I was still at home at 8:33. Linda and Dr. Patterson looked at each other again. This time, their expressions weren't so gentle. Marcus, Linda said, and her voice was colder now. You need to stop asking questions and lie down. The procedure needs to happen now. What procedure? You haven't told me what you're actually going to do. We're going to help you, Dr. Patterson said, but his voice was changing, becoming deeper and more distorted. We're going to make you understand that some places don't let go. Some jobs never end. The room was changing around me. The clean white walls were starting to crack and peel. The bright lights were flickering and dimming. The medical equipment was rusting and falling apart. But the heart monitor kept beeping. Faster and faster. You're dying, Marcus, Linda said. And now her face was starting to change too. Her skin was gray and mottled, like someone who'd been dead for a very long time. Right now, in the real world, you're bleeding out on the floor of this abandoned hospital. We're your only chance. Join us, Dr. Patterson said. His face was rotting now, pieces of flesh hanging loose from his cheekbones. Join us and live forever. The heart monitor was shrieking now, one long continuous tone. The line on the screen had gone flat, but I understood now. This was a choice every patient who died at Mercy General had faced. Join the staff and become part of the hospital forever, or die alone in the darkness. I looked at my unconscious body in the other bed. My face was pale, and there was blood pooling under my head. A lot of blood. Maybe I was dying. Maybe this was my only chance. But then I thought about Rosa, waiting at home for me, about our daughter, sleeping in her crib, about the life I had outside these walls. I stood up from the bed. No, I said, I'm not staying here. Linda's rotted face contorted with rage. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. And I ran. The room exploded into chaos behind me. Alarms blaring, voices screaming, the crash of medical equipment falling over. But I didn't look back. I ran out of room 347 and down the corridor, looking for another stairwell, another exit, anything that would get me away from that place. The building was fighting me now. Hallways led to dead ends. Doors opened onto brick walls. Stairwells collapsed under my feet. But I kept moving, kept searching. And then I found it. A window at the end of a corridor on the second floor. It was boarded up, but the boards were old and rotted. I kicked at them until they broke away. The window looked out over the loading dock area. It was a 15-foot drop, but there were some old dumpsters below that might break my fall. Behind me, I could hear them coming. Linda and Dr. Patterson and all the rest of the dead staff of Mercy General Hospital. Their voices echoed through the building. "Marcus, come back. You can't leave us." I climbed onto the windowsill and jumped. I hit the dumpster hard enough to knock the wind out of me, but nothing felt broken. I rolled off onto the asphalt and ran for the gap in the fence. Behind me, I could hear sounds from inside the hospital. Screaming, crashing, the sound of a building tearing itself apart. I made it to my car and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was back in Cedar Falls, sitting in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner with all the lights on. That's when I called 911. I told them I'd had an accident at the old hospital, that I might have a concussion. The paramedics checked me out, but aside from some bruises from landing on the dumpster, I was fine. No head injury, no bleeding, no signs that anything had happened to me at all. The police went out to Mercy General the next morning to investigate. They found evidence that someone had been in the building. Footprints in the dust, the bent door at the loading dock, but they didn't find any blood. No sign that anyone had been injured. They also found something else, though. In room 347, on the third floor, a patient chart with my name on it. The admission date was October 13th, 2023. Time of death was listed as 3:33 a.m., but I was alive. I was sitting in that diner at 3:33 a.m., drinking coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened to me. The police said it was probably just vandals playing a prank. Urban explorers who'd researched my background and planted fake evidence to mess with my head. There was no other explanation that made sense. But I know what I saw in that hospital. I know what I experienced. And I know that somewhere in room 347, there's still a bed with my name on it, waiting for me to come back and finish what I started. That was 3 months ago. I haven't been back to Mercy General, and I never will. I quit doing urban exploration entirely. I don't even like walking past hospitals anymore. But sometimes late at night, I hear my phone ring. When I answer it, there's no one there. Just the sound of a heart monitor beeping in the background. And sometimes, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I hear Linda's voice calling my name from somewhere far away. "Marcus, we're waiting for you. Your shift isn't over." I changed my phone number twice, but the calls keep coming. Always at 3:33 a.m. Rosa thinks I should see a therapist. She's probably right. Maybe talking to someone would help me score on a score. Marcus Rodriguez has since relocated to another state with his family. Mercy General Hospital was demolished in January 2024 following reports of multiple break-ins and safety concerns. The demolition crew reported no unusual incidents during process. However, several former patients and staff members have reported receiving phone calls late at night with only the sound of medical equipment beeping in the background. The calls always come at 3:33 a.m.